Good afternoon, everyone. I'm very, very thankful that you all could join us. Once again, I'm being joined by one of my favorites of all people, and that is Mr. Dustin Henry.
Hey, everybody.
Oh, yeah. Dust is an assistant pastor of, if you've kept up with us, you already know all of this, but Dustin is the assistant pastor of the Livingston Church of God here in Tennessee. Always thankful to have you, brother. Always thankful.
Thankful to be here, man.
Oh, yeah. And we are going over today 2 Samuel 3. We ended in 2 Samuel 2 last time with them burying. David had Asahel, his nephew, buried after Abner had killed him. Joab and, the brothers of Asahel are quite angry at Abner, and that will come into play in this chapter. Mm-hmm. We'll begin by reading 2 Samuel 3:1. Now there was long war between the house of Saul and the house of David. But David waxed stronger and stronger, and the house of Saul waxed weaker and weaker. And unto David were sons born in Hebron, and his firstborn was Amnon of Ahinoam the Jezreelitess, and his second Chileab of Abigail the wife of Nabal the Carmelite, and the third Absalom the son of Maacah the daughter of Talmai king of Geshur, and the fourth Adonijah the son of Haggith, the fifth Shephatiah the son of Abital, and the sixth Ithream by Eglah, David's wife. These were born to David in Hebron. We'll find out later about how David, he's a very, very blessed king, one of the most blessed of kings of all history. Mm-hmm. But his household is most certainly not blessed at all. We learn right here off the bat about a few of his children being born. Now this was before Beersheba, Solomon, and all of these. But we learn about Amnon being his first son. Amnon actually raped his half-sister later on, and he is murdered by Absalom, his half-brother. Absalom he does usurp the throne from David for a while, mm-hmm. and he's the one who kills Amnon, and I have a point to all this, and Adonijah he tries to take the throne from David right before the rise of Solomon. We know this. Mm-hmm. But if you'll see, all of these were born before the horrible thing with Beersheba and Uriah. All of these happened, all of these men were born before that time. And that goes to show us how David's household was not blessed. David had went against God's ideal for marriage. David had married many wives. It was 8 total. And he had 19 sons. You do not hear much about the other sons, so it is presumed that they died or they were wicked men. And the Bible just doesn't honor them by mentioning them. And it came to pass, while there was war between the house of Saul and the house of David, that Abner made himself strong for the house of Saul. If you'll recall real quick how Abner, the cousin of Saul, was the basic chief commander of Saul's army. And he's a very, very tough man. We'll learn about how he's a big-time bully as well. And if you'll recall how David, and I've alluded to this in previous studies, about how David actually mocks Abner whenever I believe it's 1 Samuel 26. He mocks Abner before he takes Saul's spear while he's asleep and everything. And the very first thing that he says, he gets up on the hill with the spear of Saul in the little pot of water, and he yells out to Abner. He says, "Abner, why haven't you been watching over your king? You should be put to death." He actually says this. "You should be put to death for not guarding over your king." So you get the feel that Abner was probably picking on David, just like he picks on Ishbosheth, as we'll learn right here in a second. Mm-hmm. And Saul had a concubine. Okay, so now we're coming into the debacle right here. And Saul had a concubine whose name was Rizpah, the daughter of Aiah. And Ishbosheth said to Abner, "Wherefore hast thou gone in unto my father's concubine?"
I think that action that Abner took right there shows how much respect he actually had for Ishbosheth.
Right, good point.
Because with that being his father's house, Ishbosheth's father's house, and him being crowned king, which was at Abner's persuasion, that alliance with the concubine between Saul between Saul should have been respected by Abner.
Right.
But for the fact that he came upon her in that manner, it showed a lack of respect toward Ishbosheth.
Right.
And it was a power move by Abner.
That's what I was about to say. Abner actually, whenever he said to me, and one of the theories is this also that I just learned in the studies, about how they believe that, or some believe, the vast majority believe the way that we do, and he actually did lay with Saul's concubine. I believe the Bible's pretty clear on that. But there are just a few fringe people in whom believe that Ishbosheth, seeing that Abner was very powerful and already exalting, even above himself and the Israeli nation, and he believes that, or some believe that Ishbosheth may have been making this up in order to maybe find reason to execute him. Complete French comment on that. So I mean, I don't believe that.
No, and the Bible's very clear when it comes to people who make accusations like that.
Yeah.
Accusations against Joseph.
Yeah.
You know, it was clear that was an accusation that was not true.
They pinpoint it.
Yes. Yeah. And I think that if it was an accusation that was made in falsehood, that the Bible would say that.
That God would let us know.
Yes.
Yeah.
But the way that it portrays it, and the interaction between Abner and Ishbosheth, I don't believe that. What I read, I don't believe that was a false accusation.
Me neither. Then was Abner very wroth for the words of Ishbosheth, and said, Am I a dog's head, which against Judah do show kindness this day unto the house of Saul thy father, to his brethren, and to his friends, and have not delivered thee into the hand of David, that thou chargest me today with a fault concerning this woman?
See, I think that right there, Abner didn't say a false accusation.
No, he doesn't.
He is bringing up to Ishbosheth and said...
He's angry because he got found out, it seems.
Yeah. And he got found out, and he said, look, I rose you to power.
Yeah. You owe me this concubine. Yeah,
this is the least you owe me.
Yeah, I totally get. I get that from this. It's spewing from the page.
So for what? And Abner's saying, for what?
Yeah.
You should give me for what I've done for you.
You should be grateful.
This is. And you bring this to me.
He's appalled
over a concubine.
Yeah. So do God to Abner, and more also, except as the Lord hath sworn to David, even so I do to him. So Abner is actually telling Ishbosheth, he is so taken aback by this, by being caught, that he actually tells, I mean, you can tell he's offended. He's I'm allowed to take whoever I want. But he's actually telling him to his face. He does not sneak behind Ishbosheth's back and go to David. He is telling him, I now go to David. High anxiety in the Ishbosheth camp.
Yeah, and that's the thing too. We see this in the church that when people have things brought against them of their own actions,
right,
they suddenly become very, very educated on God's laws.
Absolutely.
And basically, what he's saying to Ishbosheth is, "I'm going to honor God's anointing of David now." And it's not, and that is a disrespect.
Yeah, I'm glad that you mentioned. I don't mean to interrupt you.
No, you're fine.
But I'm glad that you mentioned that, because he actually says, and more also, except as the Lord hath sworn to David. So it was a known thing to even Abner that David was supposed to be king, and just like you just said. He says, all of Israel knows that David should be king. God told Israel David should be king. This shows rebellion, knowing, willful rebellion in Abner, that he even knew David was supposed to be king. And just like you just said, it's like the church, members of the church, they can know what is right and still go the opposite way until they get angry, being the backslid.
And until it fits their narrative. And that's exactly what he did.
Absolutely.
That fit his narrative to go against Ishbosheth.
It did. It favored him to go against God's will.
Yeah.
And the church does this too. And I'm allowed to get high. I'm allowed to do this and go sleep with this one, sleep with that one. But it's against what God would want for us to do. And they wind up being heavily offended by what they encounter, on that dark road. You know what I mean? To translate the kingdom from the house of Saul and to set up the throne of David over Israel and over Judah from Dan even to Beersheba. And he could not answer Abner a word again because he feared him. Ishbosheth's 40 years old, and this shows just how confrontational that Abner could be. Men probably feared him greatly in the land.
And that's the thing too, is a lot of kings in the ancient times, and even some past, would actually go out on the battlefield.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
Now, some kings relied on their generals and commanders to take care of that.
Yeah.
Ishbosheth was not one that went on the battlefield.
No. He comes across as a very weak king, does he not?
No, he does. And the fact that Ishbosheth didn't say, the kingdom should be mine. Right. Abner said, you should be king.
Absolutely. And Abner sent messengers to David on his behalf, saying, whose is the land? Saying also, make thy league with me, and behold, my hand shall be with thee, to bring about all Israel unto thee. We see Abner now approaching David, and he's saying, make league with me, and I'll give you all of Israel. Mm-hmm. Okay? Don't worry about Ishbosheth.
Yeah. So what Abner's trying to do is he's trying to retain that power.
Yeah.
And I'm sure that he realized that the more he pushes Ishbosheth, that someone else could come in that would have favor with Ishbosheth,
right,
and actually could take Abner out.
Yeah, it seems like Abner's doing this really quickly.
He's wanting to gain power with David because he realizes between David and Ishbosheth, David's going to win.
Yeah, but we see how Hebron is a city of refuge. Mm-hmm. Abner feels confident in that. And Dust, can you explain to us about what city of refuge were used for back then?
The cities of refuge were set up, and basically what they were was detention.
Right.
Now, if you were accused of committing a crime, murder, what the refuge cities were is you were able to go there until the judges heard the case, basically.
Right.
And then they made a determination on whether you were guilty or not.
Yeah.
Now, if you committed a murder with witnesses, you were not admitted to a refuge city. Now, if you were accused of it without any witnesses, you could go to the refuge city, and as long as you stayed inside the perimeter of the refuge city, no one could come and exact any judgment on you.
Right. Very important for what's coming up. And he said, well, I will make a league with thee, but one thing I require of thee, that is, thou shalt not see my face, except thou first bring Michal, Saul's daughter, when thou comest to see my face. So David's saying, I'll make league with you, but first bring Michal. And Michal was taken, it was David's first wife. She was taken from while he was on the run, and given to another man, who's coming up right here in just a second. And David sent messengers to Ishbosheth, Saul's son, saying, deliver me my wife Michal, which I espoused to me for 100 foreskins of the Philistines. And Ishbosheth sent and took her from her husband, even from Phatiel, the son of Laish. She has been married to, the way I reckon, about 2 years at this point. Michal has, her new husband. This would have been quite devastating, and we see the devastation in her husband right here in just a second. Mm-hmm. And her husband went with her along, weeping behind her to Bahurim. Then said Abner unto him, go, return. And he returned. I would say that Abner, pretty brash fella,
I would imagine.
He's get back home, in modern vernacular, So.
Yeah, personal commentary here.
Oh, yeah,
but I've always heard the first year of marriage is the roughest because you're learning, each other.
Oh yeah.
I can't say that's probably changed much in a couple thousand years.
Nope.
But this is the second year. You've learned each other. You're falling into kind of a routine.
Yeah.
And they come and say, hey, she's not your wife anymore.
Yeah, and there's nothing you can do about it.
No.
Yeah, that's harsh.
That's a rough day.
And Abner had communication with the elders of Israel, saying, Ye sought for David in times past to be king over you. Now then do it. For the Lord hath spoken of David, saying, By the hand of my servant David I will save my people Israel out of the hand of the Philistines, and out of the hand of all their enemies. Notice right here, Abner is talking to the elders about David. And he says, For the Lord hath spoken of David. Meaning prophecies had came out about David being king. On the comments that I was reading on this, it says, this is much like Christ. About how there were prophecies about David coming out, and the Lord had told them, this king is going to rise up and you should crown him. But we see they didn't want to crown them on their own. They were going against God's will. All of Israel, we see that time and time again. It's much like how we're told that Christ is going to come back. And many people don't want to believe it, but it's going to happen. And Abner also spake in the ears of Benjamin, and Abner went also to speak in the ears of David and Hebron, all that seemed good to Israel, and that seemed good to the whole house of Benjamin. So Abner came to David to Hebron, and 20 men with him, and David made Abner and the men that were with him a feast. Peace, come to bring peace. And remember, Abner has just got done, not long before this, killing David's nephew, Asahel. So this was a very good lesson to learn from David. He wanted peace. He didn't wish his kingdom to be established on bloodshed. And we see how Joab kind of goes against that.
We see in modern history where World War II,
right?
There's a few stories I've personally heard that we had Axis powers and Allied powers that actually met each other on the field.
Right.
And they understood that I don't hate you.
Yeah.
This is times of war.
Yeah. It's actually said that, I believe it's during World War I, that Christmas time came up, and there was just a brief peace between these two nations, and they actually went out from fighting one another and started like playing, what was it, volleyball or something?
Soccer.
Yeah, yes.
After that truce, they parted ways because they knew that in times of war, it's not that I hate you, but in the grand scheme of things, one of us has to win.
And Abner said unto David, I will arise and go, and will gather all Israel unto my lord the king, that they may make a league with thee, and that thou mayest reign over all that thine heart desireth. And David sent Abner away, and he went in peace.
Just like we talked about, Abner decided to come to the Lord's will out of anger, but what he's doing is accomplishing God's will. That's what he's saying he wants to do, which does happen. I mean, when God says that this is his will, God never says it's going to be straight.
Right.
There's constant zigzags in his will.
Not going to be the easy path
no,
most of the time.
No. No, but his will be done.
Absolutely. Abner didn't even want to kill Asahel.
No, he gave him a couple opportunities.
He was like,
can you just go away? Can you forget you see me?
Yeah, and he even says to Asahel, he says, how can I look upon your brother Joab if I fight you? So he's trying to avoid this.
Yeah.
He doesn't want to kill Asahel, but that is what happened. And Joab keeps this grudge, as what happens inside the church, as we know. There's grudges like crazy.
Yeah, and it doesn't matter. Even sometimes when someone makes a change, and they make a change and they decide to work with God's will, and they decide to further God's will, how many times do we hold on to what they've done in the past?
And behold, the servants of David and Joab came from pursuing a troop, and brought in a great spoil with them. But Abner was not with David in Hebron, for he had sent him away, and he was gone in peace. So Joab is out at war. Abner has come to him. Joab has no idea what has happened, but he quickly finds out.
Yeah.
When Joab and all the host that was with him were come, they told Joab, saying, Abner the son of Ner came to the king. and he hath sent him away, and he is gone in peace. Then Joab came to the king and said, What hast thou done? Behold, Abner came unto thee. Why is it that thou hast sent him away, and he is quite gone? So we see Joab confronting David, his uncle, on this, and it doesn't turn out well.
No, and yet again, not seeing the big picture.
Right. Yeah.
Letting your own personal feelings interfere with the big picture of God's will.
Absolutely.
Is something that at times we are all guilty of.
Oh, yeah. Every day.
Yeah. If you've seen the 2002 movie titled Hero, starring Jet Li, the premise of the movie is there's a king that has the vision to unite all of China.
Right.
Well, Jet Li's character is an assassin who is tasked at getting close enough to the king to actually kill him. Spoiler alert.
Yeah, we'll give it just 5 seconds for the spoiler alert now. One, two. Okay.
Jet Li decides at the end of the movie not to kill the king. Because what Jet Li realizes is a united China is better than the warring China that they have at the moment.
Right. I have not seen this movie, but now my interest is piqued. Yeah.
What Joab should have done is looked at a united Canaan rather than a divided civil warring Canaan.
Yep.
But he didn't.
Nope.
He let his own feelings interfere with better judgment.
And notice the ripple effect from this. I mean, peace was right there at the door. And all of a sudden, because he just let his own feelings, now look at how many people will be affected by his feelings getting in the way, his emotions getting in the way. And need to practice forgiveness. And when Joab was come out from David, he sent messengers after Abner, which brought him again from the well of Sirah, but David knew it not. So just real quick, Joab is sending these messengers out, and he's saying, Hey, Abner, got one more thing to tell you. Could you come back? And when Abner was returned to Hebron, Joab took him aside in the gate to speak with him quietly, and smote him there under the 5th rib, that he died for the blood of Asahel his brother. Dust, I think that you had a little bit of commentary on this.
Yeah, where Abner was a refuge city.
Right.
And what Joab did with the refuge cities, before you were judged whether you were guilty or not, you had sanctuary.
Right.
Now, if one of your family members was murdered, there was someone set aside in the family known as the blood avenger.
Right.
And that person was tasked with taking care of any murders that would have been lawfully done after a guilty verdict was placed.
And Dust, where can you find this in the scripture?
You can find it in Numbers 35, where it refers to the blood avenger. Now, the law set up for the refuge city was the blood avenger was the one who took care of the task.
Right.
But the blood avenger was not allowed to do it inside the perimeter of the sanctuary city.
Yeah.
Now, once a guilty verdict was placed, the blood avenger was allowed to go inside the refuge city and take care of it.
Right.
But until the blood avenger was not allowed to. The reason that Joab took Abner outside, which Abner would have been in the mindset that Joab was an ally at this point.
Yeah.
So he was tricked.
He's tricked
to going outside. Joab thinks because he got him outside the refuge city to do this task that he was within every right.
Yeah.
To do this, and
so this was a lawful act.
It was lawful in the aspect that it did not happen in the refuge city.
Is that why David? I don't mean to interrupt you, but is that why David doesn't punish Joab?
Well, he doesn't kill him.
And Dustin has been studying Numbers, Leviticus, Deuteronomy. He's been into this for months now, so he's a lot more expertise on this than me.
Yeah.
So
the fact that it happened under false pretenses, Abner had just gained peace with David.
Yeah.
Joab was a representative of David's camp.
Yeah.
So David gave that peace which Joab should have gave that peace and alliance as well.
Should have honored that.
Yes, absolutely.
And I also think that it's worthy of note that Asahel was killed during battle. Now, does that have any effect on this? This wasn't a personal thing.
Many people understood that in battle, it's not personal. Mm-hmm. It is against a flag, it is against a uniform, it is against an ideal, not an individual. Mm-hmm. Joab made it personal because it was his brother.
Right. He made it personal.
Yes, Joab made it personal because it was his brother that was killed rather than looking at the flags or the kings that they represented.
And afterward, when David heard it, he said, I and my kingdom are guiltless before the Lord forever from the blood of Abner the son of Ner. Now we see David giving a curse upon his nephew Joab. Let it rest on the head of Joab and on all his father's house, and let there not fail from the house of Joab one that hath an issue, or that is a leper, or that leaneth on a staff, or that falleth on the sword, or that lacketh bread.
And this comes to Joab did not get a death sentence because the kill was actually lawful.
Yeah.
But because it wasn't right, and especially after there was just peace declared between Abner and David, David curses Joab's family. And what he's saying in this is, there will always be someone in your family with health issues, blood issues. There will always be someone who is crippled, who has leprosy. There will always be at least one person in your family who falls on the sword. There is always going to be someone that lacketh bread, that is impoverished or famine.
Yeah.
You are always going to have someone in your family to pay for your crime. You won't pay with your life because it was lawful, but your family will be cursed with these things throughout the generations.
It sounds a lot like what happens to David later on, you know, with the Uriah death. You know, he has Uriah put to death, and then all of a sudden Nathan comes in. He says, David, you're not going to die, but your house is now pretty bad off, you know.
Yeah, and,
so I mean, you know.
Yeah, and that's the thing is David was actually shown more mercy in that situation than Joab is right here.
Yeah.
Because David did something unlawful.
Yeah. So Joab and Abishai, his brothers, slew Abner because he had slain their brother Asahel at Gibeon in the battle.
This actually reminds me of the story where Dinah was actually raped by the prince of Shechem.
Right. And
he eventually did marry her. Mm-hmm. But her brothers, Simeon and Levi.
And peace was made at that time.
And peace was made by the prince marrying Dinah.
Mm-hmm. Jacob made peace with them after that.
Simeon and Levi actually went into Shechem under false pretenses, gathered them together, and killed all the men. Mm-hmm. So yet again, it was self-serving against what the man of God said was right.
He was wanting peace, and they wanted to go in the flesh and take vengeance. Just like Joab and Abishai, how they wanted to take vengeance, there was peace right there being offered, and they had to have bloodshed. It's terrible, terrible. I really like how the Bible doesn't cover up for these men of God. You know, they really show their flaws through and through.
The more I've studied, and I know the same with you, the more that you've studied, is we understand that especially the great men of God screwed up a lot.
All the time. We talked about Samson. We'd go after Samson constantly.
Yeah, and that's the great thing about it is because God is telling us in that. He's like, look, people can serve me and screw up.
Oh yeah.
So, people think, I have to be perfect. No. Even the people of thousands of years that were actually spotlighted in the Bible.
Oh yeah, highlighted heavily.
Yes.
Yeah.
They screwed up a lot, and they went against God a lot at different times.
This brings me back to what John MacArthur said. He said, people think that God can't use sinners. He has no one else to use down here.
That's true.
Yeah, it's that's all you can use, So
absolutely.
Yeah. And David said to Joab and to all the people that were with him, rend your clothes and gird you with sackcloth and mourn before Abner. And King David himself followed the bier. Dust, could you tell us real quick what bier means? What that was?
A bier is a cart that a corpse or a coffin would be on that's movable that they would actually take to the burial or the cremation. So what this is saying right here is David himself followed it. And that is showing solidarity with Abner, that he was following it and that he actually was mourning this death of an ally, even though he wasn't an ally until recently.
A high honor for Abner.
Absolutely, absolutely.
Very much.
And for David to tell everyone to tear their clothes in mourning, he was telling them to mourn.
Yeah.
That he was telling them, we do not need to see him as a enemy.
Yeah.
We created peace with him.
I think that David's seen the tragedy in this.
Yes.
And he said, if you're not mourning, mourn. He said, this is a terrible thing that has happened. And it's his nephew that is at fault. And they buried Abner in Hebron, and the king lifted up his voice and wept at the grave of Abner, and all the people wept. And the king lamented over Abner, and said, died Abner as a fool dieth? Could you tell us really quick, because it says that Abner died as a fool dieth. And I had to actually ask you behind the scenes what that meant, because I had no idea. And you had really good commentary on that. Could you?
And that's what David's saying is basically, you died like a fool did.
Right.
But David's saying you shouldn't have. Now in the next verse when it actually says, thy hands were not bound, nor thy feet put into fetters, he's basically saying that you did not die honorably. You did not succumb to someone in battle. You were not captured by your enemy. You were deceived.
I believe you got a great point, especially mentioning battle. Abner had fought all these battles and lived through all of them. But, come this close to death, and all of a sudden he dies in such a dishonorable, like you said, way. Thy hands were not bound, nor thy feet put into fetters. As a man falleth before wicked men, so fellest thou. And all the people wept again over him. And when all the people came to cause David to eat meat while it was yet day, David swears, saying, so do God to me, and more also, if I taste bread, or aught else, till the sun be down. And all the people took notice of it, and it pleased them, as whatsoever the king did pleased all the people.
See, that's a perfect example of lead by example.
Right.
David mourned an ally, even though he was a past adversary, he mourned an ally.
Absolutely.
He showed respect. If I have an enemy, it's not good that my enemy, that wickedness befalls them.
Right.
I shouldn't want that.
Right.
The Bible says to pray for your enemy.
Right. For all the people and all Israel understood that day that it was not of the king to slay Abner the son of Ner. And the king said unto his servants, know ye not that there is a prince and a great man fallen this day in Israel? And I am this day weak, though anointed king, and these men, the sons of Zeruiah, be too hard for me. The Lord shall reward the doer of evil according to his wickedness. Once again, last note, he's referring to Joab, his nephew. This goes to show you how David it doesn't matter if you're the closest to him. Evil is evil. Wrong is wrong. And David doesn't like it either way.
This is a perfect example that we see in the modern church.
Right.
Denominations. We all have different names over the door.
Tons of them.
But if you look at this, if you look at the analogy of the armed forces.
Right.
You have the Army, the Navy, the Air Force, Marines, Coast Guard.
Yep.
When you look at the U.S. Armed Forces, we all do different things.
Right.
But we all have the same main goal.
Same goal in mind.
And when it comes to denominations, we all have different traits about us. But as long as we all have the same main goal, the animosity of the favoritism of your own ideals doesn't need to stand.
Right.
We all have the same goal, and that's what Abner and David had at the end. They had the same goal.
Yeah. To unite Israel.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And when someone decides to have their own personal feelings interfere with that, then there are consequences for that, just like Joab and his family are going to witness for generations after that.
I hope that y'all learned an awful lot today, Dust. Awesome, brother.
Always a pleasure, brother.
Love you, brother. I'm telling you, man.
You too,
well,
man.
I always want you to come back around. I've been wanting to holler at you for the last, like I said, a couple months, but he's busy all the time. He's always working. But anyway, thanks once again, Dust. That is our study for today. Tomorrow, Lord willing, we will get into 2 Samuel 4. God, a peace be with you all. Amen.